These files were never meant to be public, but someone reopened them. This is the Dark Bureau. Red lines are drawn where few expect them, often invisible until crossed in everyday life. What seems on the surface to foster openness can conceal a carefully engineered framework, one designed by unseen hands. These are not simply public partnerships or government deals, but intricate networks embedded in boardrooms, embassies, neighbourhood associations, and business groups. Beneath the appearance of international cooperation lies a system that operates quietly, shaping and guiding far more than is ever declared, all under a veil of legitimacy. What if the most ambitious state-driven influence machine was never meant to look like one? What if it operates openly, weaving lines of power through communities and sectors so subtly that its guidance is almost untraceable? This is the story of the Chinese Communist Party's United Front system. Tonight, we examine how its sprawling network burrows into public institutions, political circles, business, and ordinary life. This is influence without uniforms, leverage without open threat, and boundaries tested with tactics designed to evade exposure. Its rise exposes both the ambitions of an authoritarian system and the vulnerabilities of open societies. At first glance, the United Front appears dated, an array of cultural clubs, business chambers, and friendship societies speaking in the language of partnership and prosperity. Governments often see these groups as ordinary engagement channels, but just beneath this surface, familiar images splinter. Civic exchange is braided with hidden coordination, shared events with covert priorities. The network stretches from tech hubs in North America through European parliaments to the neighbourhoods of Australia and New Zealand. Its influence is ambiguous, but always persistent. In elections, trade, and public debates, opportunities are found, not always through brute force, but by steady nudging and subtle, cumulative pressure until conversations begin to align with interests still unspoken. Each association, festival, or business forum becomes an anchor point in a global system. The unresolved question, who calls the shots, for whose benefit, and under what disguise? The investigation began in the shadows of financial flows, party donations and think tank gifts well beyond local means, abrupt spikes in political campaign support, and investments routed through complex, opaque channels. At first, these seemed isolated, but as donations, sponsorships, and academic endowments were mapped together, something larger appeared. A blueprint of coordinated activity, all tied to instructions from United Front work departments in China. Internal memos and intercepted communications made intentions clear: to build relationships, spread approved narratives, reward reliable allies, and offer friendship in exchange for influence. Groups once known for cultural events or business delegations were repurposed into conveyor belts for resources, funding think tanks, guiding journalists, and quietly shaping the coalitions around key policy debates. In some markets, United Front-linked funding made its way into local media, altering editorial lines in subtle but lasting ways. Incentives and penalties, both economic and personal, were quietly introduced. Their effects accumulated, policy debates reweighted, some voices amplified or silenced, and certain topics fading from legitimate conversation altogether. As inquiries deepened, the pattern darkened. Grassroots advocacy, supporting migrants or entrepreneurs, often traced its leadership to handlers in China. Some business groups found trade deals came with fresh obligations, memoranda of understanding, that subtly required echoing official lines. Around elections, financial flows, laundered via intermediaries or shell entities, lifted favoured candidates. Occasionally, these candidates, unaware or unconcerned, would deliver messaging almost indistinguishable from official Chinese narratives. The deliberate complexity made it almost impossible for officials or the public to discern what was being bought or who, if anyone, was pulling the strings. Documents seized by investigators, never meant for outside eyes, showed a system built for plausible deniability. On the surface, language of cultural exchange and mutual benefit. Behind closed doors, detailed directives, compliance check-ins, and return reporting, all funneled to Beijing. Public events, street fairs, dinners, and fundraisers could be repurposed as opportunities for message seeding and quiet cultivation of influential proxies. Academic partnerships and tech collaboration sometimes camouflage mapping of research environments or careful talent outreach. On inspection, the ordinary became extraordinary. Familiar civic activity subtly co-opted. Counterintelligence struggled to keep up. Unlike traditional espionage, these efforts were usually legal, rarely criminal. They thrived in grey zones, soft power as strategic advantage, civic engagement as covert control. In boardrooms and conference halls, even defenders of open society missed the shift. Activity that did not break laws but bent the rules of civic life. Reports and think tank publications, weighted with careful citations, often reflected talking points delivered through these networks. No single event set off alarms, but over time, institutions were quietly reconfigured, decisions nudged, interpretations altered, priorities rewired, almost invisibly. To piece together the global picture, analysts mapped respected organisations with real histories. United Front-affiliated groups began by backing local activism or charity, then pivoted, splitting controversial policy debates or amplifying division once interests overlapped. In Australia and New Zealand, local Chinese language media was gradually redirected until it mirrored Beijing's coverage, fueled by funds that could not be traced to any domestic source. Across Europe, routine goodwill exchanges soon evolved into sustained lobbying, shaping policy over years, on everything from infrastructure investment to official attitudes toward dissent. The process relied on slowly blurring the distinction between genuine soft power and covert manipulation, between friendship and the subtle compromising of independence. A turning point came with a major document leak. Leaked United Front directives stripped away ambiguity, exposing core techniques, identifying influences in foreign communities, manipulating press through privileged access or funding, and managing business deals for message control. Pressure points were mapped. Create support where possible, orchestrate opposition if necessary. The leak demolished old assumptions. No longer a relic of Maoist diplomacy, the United Front had evolved into an engine of global influence, more ambitious and networked than most open societies were ready to confront. Lawmakers and security officials, limited by narrow definitions of interference, grappled with how to defend civic space when the boundary between engagement and influence became so blurred. Governments scrambled to respond. Legislation expanded transparency rules, registering foreign agents, and scrutinising donations to think tanks, universities, and local charities. Some partnerships were quietly unwound, others publicly exposed. Community leaders, often unaware of the broader strategy, were dragged into debates, sometimes smeared unfairly. The backlash was unpredictable. Trust within diaspora communities eroded, suspicion and accusation flared, and policy split sharply between calls for sovereignty and warnings against xenophobia. Open societies found themselves confronting precisely the kind of uncertainty and internal division that sophisticated foreign influence seeks to create. Yet, the United Front system adapted. Where transparency laws tightened, activity migrated to app-based networks, digital platforms, and joint ventures in infrastructure and technology. Messaging moved to encrypted channels. New influence routes were designed through investment in critical sectors. Investigators now chase digital campaigns, algorithmic content shifts, and next-generation research partnerships, always a step behind the system's latest iteration. Each defensive improvement spurred new countermeasures. The resilience of the network was now its defining feature. This challenge highlights the deeper vulnerability of open societies. Was the desire for engagement, investment, and exchange the blind spot that enabled such influence? Are institutional safeguards, built for the threats of the last century, truly equipped for a sophisticated multinational influence campaign that works across laws and social norms? Overreaction risks stoking suspicion. Under-response leaves institutions exposed and easily shaped. Policymakers, journalists, educators, and business leaders are pressed to answer the question anew: how to balance openness with vigilance and global engagement with transparency and system integrity. The United Front story is not ultimately about deception alone, but about systemic design, a warning about the intersection of open societies and networks operating behind unseen boundaries. The task is not merely to unmask individual operations, but to understand and harden the architecture of influence itself. Real accountability depends on seeing and countering the system, not just its symptoms. Year by year, the boundaries between advocacy and orchestration grow thinner. The imperative for democracies: reinforce the red lines that protect them, even as the system adapts. As long as influence works best in shadowy margins, rewarding opacity, exploiting institutional gaps, the case remains open. Real protection demands relentless vigilance and a capacity to see and confront the underlying design shaping our world.